All right, the top 5 first-year head coaches in the best position to win. We do this now post-spring and mostly post-transfer portal. We still got some dominoes that can fall, but the major ones have fallen. Number 5, Mario Cristobal at Miami. Now that Miami is fully backing with NIL, and we'll see what happens with the facilities. That's such a sticky wicket. You know, we had Craig and I had a Christopher Stock on about Miami, and I said, what about the stadium on campus? And he kind of gave the party line of like, look, they play in a world-class NFL stadium. Why would they move? And I was like, my brain was like, because no one goes. But also no one probably goes because Miami hasn't been that good for the last over a decade. So almost 20 years, really. They've been very average. So, but Mario Cristobal steps into a situation where he's got the full backing of everyone, top to bottom, president, alumni, fans, everybody. And plus the NIL at Miami could kind of get crazy. And they're trying to help them spend their way back into relevance.
Yeah, and then plus he's just a damn good football coach. I mean, from what we've seen, he's got a lot of experience now at this point, and I think he had Oregon headed in a pretty good direction. I mean, granted, that wasn't a team he took over that was in need of like a massive rebuild by any means, but did a good job with the Ducks, and they certainly appeared to have wanted him to stick around and finish what he started. But obviously, home came calling, and we know what happens sometimes when home comes calling. But yeah, I mean, they're benefiting from NIL and not just in football. And I think they will continue to. But there is an excitement and a little bit of a buzz with Miami. Just 7-5 last year, second in their division. So not a terrible year, but 7 wins. I mean, that's eking out a bowl game, basically. So, I'd expect a much different tune from them this season.
Yeah, number 4, Dan Lanning at Oregon, the guy who takes over for Mario Cristobal. I think he's a defensive genius, and he comes out of a defensive genius's tree and Kirby Smart. That is something that you don't really talk about Oregon that much. You talk about defensive, framed football because they've been such an offensive juggernaut. Most of the times they've been good, but he takes over a team that was, even despite some transfer portal departures, was pretty loaded. And not only that, I like Bo Nix going up there with Kenny Dillingham. I think that's going to work out well for them in the Pac-12. I think the Pac-12 is going to be a really interesting league. One of the other coaches on this list is probably kind of obvious, but look, if Utah pretty much set up to be back what they were last year, and then of course you add in some of the other things. But I like Dan Lanning at Oregon. I think he'll pretty much hit the ground running.
Yeah, he was a guy who benefited from Mel Tucker going to Michigan State. That turned out to be great for Michigan State, turned out to be great for Georgia, and now you hope that, if you're a Ducks fan, it turns out to be great for Oregon this next step. But, yeah, I mean, he did a good job with the Dogs, obviously, helped put them over the top and to where they are right now, finally being able to celebrate a national championship for the first time in, decades. But Oregon, everybody seems to do well there for the most part. I mean, I know there's been some misses, but I mean that they've remained a steady program throughout it all. They've had multiple coaches now at this point since they really got the ball rolling back in the early 2000s, and they've been able for the most part to just maintain a steady level of success no matter how many times somebody different walked through that door. So I look at them. I mean, they're one of the biggest brands out there. I'm surprised, I really am, that we haven't heard way more about them in NIL. Like, I thought that they would be the leaders of the pack, that you'd just be seeing Nike deals left and right. But, I mean, can you recall really hearing all that much about Oregon and name, image, likeness?
Maybe because that was already done.
Yeah, maybe. But, I just figured they'd be way more of a player, and maybe they are just doing it on a little bit of a quieter level. But, yeah, great program, great, history, and he appears to be, everything you want in a head coach.
Georgia and Brigham Young are 2 of their 3 non-conference games. And then starting next year, they have Tech for 2 years. And then eventually Oklahoma State for 2 years, and then Baylor for a couple of years. So they'll be playing the Big 12 quite a bit.
That Baylor-Oregon game we wanted about 7 years ago will not look the way we wanted it to look, back then. It will be interesting to see what else.
Instead of Art Briles versus Chip Kelly, it could be Dan Lanning versus Dave Aranda, 2 coaches that could afford. I mean, they could not be more different than the other ones. So, yeah. By the way, I wonder if you go to Oregon and they're like, hey, here's some brand new Nike shoes. You're like, I'm a big Reebok guy. Like, not anymore.
I don't think you go to Oregon if you are a non-Nike guy.
Yeah. No. Number 3, Brian Kelly from LSU. I wrestled on this one a little bit. He's got to remake a roster almost completely. He hasn't settled on a quarterback, although I think it's probably going to be Jaden Daniels. There are a lot of things going on, when you talk about building a roster, but I mean, outside of his goofiness and, his kind of car salesman vibe, the guy is administratively an excellent football coach. X and O, he's a really good football coach, and he's brought in some really good assistants with him to LSU. So I think they're pretty much set up to have first-year success. Although they are in the SEC West, it's going to be tough. But I just don't see the curve being all that big for Brian Kelly. I don't know if they were really all that bad to start off with. It was more of it just organizational issues that were plaguing LSU.
Yeah, I mean, they left a dumpster fire in that athletic department. He took over a football program that was really kind of in the midst of a lot of just unknown and obviously a big exodus. I actually think this would be the perfect time to bring in our newest producer to get his thoughts on, the team that he's a fan of and Brian Kelly and all of that. So, Garrett, Ross, our newest producer here on Sikkim 365, he actually goes back with us to our old place as well. But what are your thoughts, Mr. LSU, on Brian Kelly?
So I initially didn't like the hire. I really was a Coach O guy. I loved everything Coach O brought. He was when you think of LSU, he embedded the culture, right? Brian Kelly, Paul, I think you bring up an excellent point. X's and O's, he's tremendous. When you come in, though, and your first thing is a fake Southern accent, and then you're posing with recruits doing in a creepy manner, that throws me off. I'm hoping that gets put to the side, and it becomes one of those things that in a few years after a national championship, you kind of look back and laugh on. But at the same time, I need to see it. And there's a lot of turnover on the roster, obviously, but it's LSU. It recruits itself. It's always going to be a top program. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, it might take a little time. It might be like trying to, mold some bread. You got to let it rest for a little bit before it rises.
Well,
I think there'll be enough to get a bowl game, but I don't know about much more than that. I really don't.
He's won everywhere he's been. I mean, he's proven, got a proven track record. But I do think that you have to take into account not only what all they lost and what they're trying to figure out, but where they are. I mean, it's not like trying to win the Big 12. It's trying to survive in your own division, not even your own conference. So, I mean, that throws up another mountain in the range of what he's trying to overcome to get them back to where they were. So it might take, a little extra time as a result of that. But I do think he's a damn good coach. I mean, that's proven. So, there's nothing missing at LSU outside of just the things that he needs to do roster-wise that can't make this a good marriage.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think they're going to make a bowl game. But I don't. I mean, like I said, first-year success means win more than the last guy did, and I think he's going to do that. Number 2, Marcus Freeman. I don't know about win more than the last guy did, but I do think that LSU, Notre Dame outside of quarterback is pretty much every question solved. I mean, he
has been on he's been on a recruiting, one of those alumni things, and for Notre Dame, that means from West Coast to East Coast because they're that big of a brand. He has really kind of taken what Brian Kelly kind of complained or kind of said that they were always working uphill with recruiting because of the standards and all that stuff. He's done a hell of a job at Notre Dame. They're getting commitments that, not that they didn't have good players, but it seemed like he's gotten a little bit extra better players and deeper and maybe one of their best classes on their way in his first year as a head coach.
Well, and he's young and energetic, too. I mean, I think that's going to translate very well. Really
well. They got the number 1 recruiting class in the country right now, and they've got 8 less commits than the number 2 team in Texas Tech, who's already at 20. And, that's a testament to great recruiting at Tech, but that's also them being number 2 because they have 20 versus, having 13 or 12 like a lot of the other schools do. So for him to have only 12 and still, be number 1, I think, that's a great feeling if you're a Notre Dame fan that he's just getting started on a recruiting trail and they should be in that range pretty much the entire time he's there. Talk about the juice that's missing from like Baylor baseball, for example. I think that, Notre Dame it's not like they were struggling by any means. They were making the college football playoff and winning a bunch of games, but I do think that there is a juice now with Marcus Freeman just being young and vibrant and doing things a little bit differently that should pay them dividends.
Well, and I think that it was kind of made clear Brian Kelly, when he kind of left, said, well, I felt restricted there.
Right.
I think Marcus Freeman is making those excuses. Like he's able to say, I don't feel restricted.
Work with what you got, man.
Let's go. I mean, this is, he's like, I'm at Notre freaking Dame.
I mean, and that's fine that Brian Kelly said that, but it was good enough to get to the college football playoff. It was good enough to compete for a national title. That shouldn't be excused just because you didn't ultimately win one.
Yeah, exactly. And number 1, Lincoln Riley at USC. And I say this because literally nothing has gone wrong for him from the time that he's taken the job until now. So until something does, and look, he's got to make that team gel. They're going to be better, but Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison, every other transfer they got in the world, that's going to be a really talented team. Making them gel and making it work in year 1 is going to be difficult, but, I mean, they are immensely more talented than they were less than a year ago.
Yeah, they are, and they're recruiting. They already got 3 5-stars committed for next year. They only have, I think, like 7 commits or something like that, but because their players are rated so high, they're still a top 10 recruiting team right now, so that's pretty impressive to have that kind of an average, and that's what you would expect, right? 5 stars in Hollywood left and right, and just bringing more into the fold. He's a good football coach. Obviously there's definitely room to question, maybe some of the things at Oklahoma, whether it's the defense or this or that. But I do think Lincoln Riley is a coach who's going to score a lot of points at Southern Cal. Can they stop anybody? That will be the question. But I would expect that there will be a lot more energy and conversation surrounding the Trojans this year. Besides just the fact that it's new and it's fresh, I think just as a football team, they're going to be talked about a lot more than they have been in a while.
All right. We appreciate that, Paul. Very, very well done. Garrett, we got about a minute